kind of off to the side so you can move into the frame. We actually have QR codes here. Samantha will distribute. These will be temporarily available during today. Before I begin, this is just contextual for media that's here right now. That QR code will have a repository of different items that are included. These are not, they're not the finalized version. We just actually filed the matter. So that will actually be put out here in just a few minutes. So feel free to scan it. I'm going to reference a couple of them. You can also scan it later, and we'll just go through it.
What's the password?
The password is justice, all caps. And congratulations, Noble, you made a footnote in a filing in a court case today. So,
Okay.
Good morning, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and begin. For those that don't know me, my name is Attar Hasibullah. First name spelled A-T-H-A-R, last name H-A-S-E-E-B-U-L-L-A-H. I'm the Executive Director for the American Civil Liberties Union of Nevada. We want to thank you all for coming today to hear the announcement of our latest filing, hot off the filing desk as of 10 minutes ago. Since February of 2025, the ACLU of Nevada has submitted multiple public records requests to uncover whether the Nevada DMV was cooperating at any level with ICE. Over several months, each of these requests was denied. And after sending a formal demand letter to the state, the Nevada DMV finally turned over a series of correspondences which are heavily redacted and don't paint a complete picture, but those records established, incredibly, that at best, there was suspicious communications that existed between the DMV and between ICE. The DMV and ICE have remained in communication, have seemingly been collaborative, and communications between what appears to be ICE and the DMV in one heavily redacted record, where both signature line is redacted and an intro portion to an email is partially redacted, suggests there are signal group chats between staff at ICE and the Nevada DMV. The lawsuit we filed today seeks a court order forcing the DMV to comply with the state's public records requirements. To be clear, we are not stating unequivocally that ICE and the DMV are communicating via signal. However, the records released to us reflect that communications included as an exhibit within our filing, which again is heavily redacted and was redacted when it was turned over to us, these are not our redactions, appear to be sent from an entity outside of the state of Nevada. The request that we made was for email correspondences that ended with ICE's traditional ending for their email addresses, and specifically correspondence between the agency and the DMV. It is not clear to us why much of the material and many of the items were so heavily redacted. And if the DMV states that there are no signal messages and signal communications between ICE and the DMV, it raises a series of additional questions, specifically why the requester didn't ask to be added to group text messages, to WhatsApp messages, or anything else of the sort, simply to email groups and signal groups. Nevada law requires the preservation of public records, and the public has a right to know how state agencies are operating, the same state agencies they fund, especially when it comes to data sharing and cooperation between Nevada agencies and immigration enforcement. Additionally, the challenge raises significant concerns about whether the DMV has actually violated NRS 481.063, subsection 11, which prohibits the DMV from releasing personal information from a file or record relating to a license, ID card, or title of registration of a vehicle to any person or to any federal, state, or local government entity for any purpose relating to immigration enforcement, without a subpoena or a judicial warrant. The records provided to the ACLU of Nevada, even while heavily redacted, show consistent communication between the DMV and ICE, but they have no references to judicial orders, judicial warrants, and or subpoenas. Our requests are as follows: the full and complete turnover of any and all records that show correspondence between ICE and the DMV, the complete disclosure of any signal group chats that have ever existed between staff at the Nevada DMV and ICE, including any communications that have occurred between the two on Signal. If the DMV denies the existence of such messages, a clear explanation made publicly available why references were made specifically to Signal group chats between ICE and the DMV and not to other mechanisms for communication. Finally, we'd ask for an independent investigation to be conducted by the state and full disclosure by the governor of any and all existences of cooperation between ICE and the DMV. Unfortunately, the reality is that when encrypted applications like Signal are used, it makes it very difficult for anybody in the public to know what's occurring. Again, we don't have established proof that the chats are there, that their groups are there, but the records reflect that there's correspondence related to requests for addition to such. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Sedmira Ramich. She'll be followed by our legal director, Chris Peterson, and then Assembly members Max Carter, Cecilia Gonzalez, and Nevada Immigrant Coalition leader Erica Castro. So I'll turn it over to Sedmira at this time. We also have a series of microphones, so we're going to do our best here.
Oh, okay, there's multiple. Thank you, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is Sedmira Ramich. It's spelled S-A-D-M-I-R-A-R-A-M-I-C, and I'm the senior staff attorney here at the ACLU of Nevada. As Atar mentioned, we have filed a lawsuit against the DMV. The Nevada Public Records Act is clear that a governmental entity such as the DMV has a duty to turn over public records upon request. We have made multiple requests to the DMV to get information on how they are communicating with ICE. We made those requests over the course of 6 months, and we were stonewalled at each way. Initially, they did not want to turn over any records. They indicated that they were not public records to be turned over. As Atar mentioned, we sent a demand letter, and afterwards were provided some of the records, but not all, and those records were heavily redacted. The information that we did receive and that we did review is concerning. Their lack of transparency concerning these records is concerning, but looking at the information that was included in these redacted records at least shows that ICE has made requests to the DMV for information of individuals. Additionally, as Atar had alluded to, there was mentions of a Signal chat in one of the emails. If you don't know, the Signal is an end-to-end encryption messaging app which has features such as the ability to have messages disappear automatically, and that in and of itself is concerning, given that there's a preservation of records that's required under the Public Records Act, and begs the question of why is this being used in the first place if it is being used. So I'll be happy to answer questions afterwards, but I will turn it over to Chris Peterson.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Chris Peterson. I'm the legal director here at the ACLU of Nevada. As many of you most likely know, our organization regularly submits public records requests, and we regularly litigate public records requests. Something that almost immediately caught our eye was the irregularities in the DMV's response to our public records requests. When we submitted our first public records request, they did not tell us whether or not they were withholding records or whether or not they were responsive records. They also provided no legal basis to not provide records. That happened through multiple requests that we made directly to the DMV, and that's why we sent the demand letter off to the AG's office. Furthermore, in their initial indication that there were no public records, obviously their response months later showed that there were public records that were directly responsive to what we'd asked for. When we received those records, something else that caught our eye is that they had redacted the names of the public officials involved in those emails. That is highly uncommon when we submit public records requests to agencies across Nevada, whether or not they're state agencies or local agencies. Often they'll redact email addresses or personal information such as addresses, social security numbers, and the like, but rarely do we see public officials' names not being redacted. Obviously, that'd be public information. Furthermore, when it comes to redactions, under Nevada law, courts are required to find that disclosure is preferred. Block redactions without explanation as to what the legal basis is to redact that information violates Nevada's laws. We are obviously seeking the records from court. However, we are also seeking civil penalties under the Nevada Public Records Act for this ongoing violations of the Nevada Public Records Act to this day. We are seeking to make sure that our entities here in Nevada are aware of their responsibilities and will be held accountable when they do not follow the law.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Assemblymember Gonzalez, and I represent. Oh, I got two. Oh, dear. Okay. I'm gonna just hold them because that's the cute thing to do nowadays. I represent Assembly District 16 here in the Nevada Legislature, and I'm also the chair of the Nevada Legislative Latino Caucus. And at the heart of democracy, it's trust. And that trust gets broken when things are done in the dark. We as elected officials, specifically as elected officials of color, work very hard every single day to earn that trust from our community. We show up, we listen, and we provide to the people that we serve. But all of that work gets undermined when you have government agencies operating in the dark and behind people's backs, outside of people's public oversight. This isn't just bad optics. This isn't just talking points. We're not here today just to talk politics. This is a betrayal of trust between our government and people. We don't have to answer to you, is essentially what they're telling us. Nevadans deserve a government that works for them in the open, that is transparent, and that is not in the shadows. A government that tells the truth, even when it's uncomfortable. And that is the work that we do every single day, because transparency isn't just good policy, it's the way that government should operate. Let me be clear. If you cannot operate in transparency, you're not protecting the people, you are hiding from the people that you so say you represent. So we as Nevada elected officials are not going to stand by this. We are demanding transparency from every entity involved. Thank you so much. Oh, I'm sorry. I may have dropped it.
I think you might have squeezed too hard. Technical assistance. It's flashing. I don't know what that means.
Just trying to connect. This one's good.
Good morning. I'm Max Carter II. I was born, raised, grew up, and raised my family on the east side of Las Vegas, which is a heavily multicultural community and has been my whole life. And now I'm blessed to be the assemblyman from District 12, the far east side, the base of Sunrise Mountain. I'm the one who brought this original piece of legislation, AB 407, that became this law. And the reason I brought it is because knocking doors, talking to my community, there was a desire that it started off talking about having people drive legally and the driver's authorization cards, but it morphed into concerns from the multi-generational households that we have a lot of in my community, and the concerns that grandma or grandpa could face persecution by getting a driver's authorization cards because of status. And you know, we are a nation of laws. We all assume that due process is the default method. Well, we found out that it wasn't necessarily the default method. And that's why I brought this piece of legislation, is to bring some security to my community, to our community, that the same laws apply to everyone. That's why I brought it, and that's why it went through the legislative process and was signed into law by our governor. And it did not stop the sharing of information, it just mandated that there be due process, which is all any of us expect, and it's what we as Americans should demand. Thank you.
Let me just make sure the audio is good on both. Okay.
Good morning. My name is Erika Castro. I'm the organizing director with PLAN, the Progressive Leadership Alliance in Nevada, and I'm also helping currently lead the Nevada Immigrant Coalition. As Assemblyman Carter mentioned, in 2023, we were able to pass a law that ensured that the DMV would not share information with ICE to make sure that our communities were protected. This meant that our communities would be able to access driver authorization cards and drive safely on our roads. Unfortunately, today we hear about the collaboration and the lack of transparency that we're hearing from DMV. We're currently seeing a lot of fear in our communities. There's a lot of uncertainty. This impacts students' safety, this impacts students' attendance. We're seeing this impact our economy. And when we hear that the DMV is communicating with ICE and we're not sure exactly the information that they're providing around our communities, driver authorization cards, that's only gonna create more fear in our communities. The lack of transparency is going to push our communities more into the shadows. And as we see an increase in government overreach by the current administration, we have to demand that our local agencies follow our state laws and remain committed to serving Nevadans. Thank you.
Okay, folks, before we open this up for questions, and hopefully we'll be able to get through all the questions to the best of our ability, just a couple other things that I want to mention. The official filing for this, as well as the exhibits, will be shared with you during the next hour. If you are not on our press list, please connect with Jordan. Wave your hand, Jordan. And she'll be able to get you a full official copy of the filing. That'll also be available on our website at some point later when we're able to update it. There's two things I want the public to be fully aware of. Our goal here is not to discourage people from going to the DMV or to create distrust. In fact, it's the opposite. The point of transparency is to create a system that's accountable, where people can feel confident going into a government institution and receiving the services that they're legally able to get. That's the point of this. The point is transparency. We think transparency, and we'll continue to say it, is the best disinfectant against tyranny and against authoritarianism. So the point of this, again, the hope is that through this process we'll get to a place where we can uncover everything that's happened between ICE and the DMV and ensure there's no nefarious or improper behavior between ICE and the DMV, and via the use potentially of signal between ICE and any other government agency in the state of Nevada. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions. We'll turn over some of them to different folks if they come up, and I think that they're more relevant to speak on it. But we'll go ahead and take questions now. And again, the full filing and the exhibits will be out in the next hour. Noble?
What information do you think the DMV might be sharing with us?
So at a bare minimum, we have at least several correspondences, and I'll share one. That's one of the exhibits, right, that's come up. A request from the DMV to a staffer, or sorry, a request from ICE to a staffer at the DMV. And while it says, the email reads as follows: while I have you, can you pull the driver's license photos and information for the following? And there's three redacted lines underneath that don't actually disclose what that is. From my vantage point, after this law is passed, if that information is turned over, violation of the law. And we've seen that throughout most of these correspondences, that there's back and forth communication and information sharing that's occurring. Now, from our vantage point, this was not something, I'll mention as a tangent, that was a Nostradamus level prediction on our end. Go fishing for information. The reason why we did this specifically is because a complaint we received anonymously that I fielded personally several months ago that described a contact made from ICE to an individual after that individual went to the DMV. That individual raised issues and stated that they were concerned that their visit to the DMV led to a contact from ICE. That's why we put in the records that followed. When I'm saying months ago, this is really towards, I think, the end of January of 2025. And right now, we've also seen items that are discussed within these chats that include increased immigration enforcement numbers, which, or at least that's what it seems, that creates its own challenge. So we've seen some of those communications throughout. Again, we're going to release the full records that the DMV has turned over to us. You all will be able to review and provide context for what you think is the most important there, but from our vantage point, it's not clear to us why the DMV was doing that, and what, if any, communications are not included because of Signal. There's not even a confirmation whether or not they're using Signal. In fact, there's a denial from the DMV that they're using Signal chats, which makes it odd, considering there's, again, specific reference to Signal groups, not WhatsApp groups, not text message groups, Signal groups.
I guess that kind of goes off to my next question for you is what evidence do you guys have that the use of this encrypted chat such as Signal is basically used to avoid public scrutiny?
Well, we can't say that, right? Like, there's no way legitimately, and we'd never lie to the public. That's one thing we'll never do. We'll never mislead what the facts are, right? The facts are based on the records we receive. And the records we receive are specific requests from what appears to be ICE. Again, heavily redacted, and there's no need to redact signature lines or who's sending the message or agency names from it. That specifically reference Signal group chats. You don't talk about Signal groups, generally speaking, unless there's a reason for using encrypted technology. I think I mentioned earlier, Noble has covered the issue with respect to Signal use by government officials, which is why he factored in as a footnote within the filing today. We encourage folks to understand what Signal is if they're not familiar with it. But the use of any encrypted technology is problematic, and the preservation of public records is key, and that's the law. So any use at any point creates its own issue, because we won't know what's deleted and what's not. We're also, the reason why we mentioned state investigation into this independently is because the number of redactions that we receive don't give us a whole lot of faith that even through means of litigation, they're not potentially hiding other records. We don't know what that looks like, right? And so we go by the records we received, and if these records were less redacted, perhaps we might be able to draw alternative conclusions. But when you provide us with 200 pages of documents that are overwhelmingly redacted, it makes it hard to draw positive inferences. We can only go by what's included in the chat. So we don't know what was said. We don't know if anything was said. We know there's a reference and to a request between the entities that discuss the use of Signal group chats. Carla?
In your view, does the evidence that you found bypass the protections put in place in 2023 for those Nevada drivers' authorization cards?
I believe so. And the reason why I believe so is because the correspondence I just pointed to asked for information. It's specifically being requested by ICE, and there's no warrant or subpoena that seems to be included within those emails. Again, it's hard for us to say because we received heavily redacted emails after 4.5 months of back and forth, where our records requests were being summarily denied, closed out without justification for it. There's not even really legal citations, as Chris had mentioned, that establish proof for why there would need to be these types of redactions. That in and of itself is problematic. Our hope, though, is to be able to investigate this, and we can only do that with complete records. It's part of the reason why we want the state to conduct an investigation and be fully transparent with the public. If you have nothing to hide, put everything out. There shouldn't be any provisions of this that are kept from us because we fund the DMV.
To your knowledge, has any of that information shared led to arrest or deportations?
We don't know. We can only suspect what's occurred with respect to the actual consequences of this information sharing. And that's also part of the problem. We will attempt to continue to follow up and get additional records. But certainly it's a question that's valid. And part of the reason why this is so critical right now is when we're starting to hear about enhanced ICE enforcement and enforcement increasing. One of the largest repositories of data within the state of Nevada shouldn't be engaged in any form of communication that's not transparent and public and doesn't fall within the parameters of law. Now, if the DMV comes back and says we didn't violate any laws, we didn't do anything wrong, make the records public so we can have assurances. All we have right now are half-baked, suspicious emails that are going to create a lot of doubt in whether or not the agency is actually complying with the law.
Can you just remind me again what specific sections of Nevada's public records laws are being violated in this case?
Yeah, I'm going to bring up Chris and Sammy for that one. I'll come right back to you on that one.
Thank you.
So in this QR code, there's an exhibit that kind of requests that a new employee be added to the Signal chat. Is that a DMV employee, and is ICE asking that?
That's the specific item that we're referencing. And that's where things become very, very problematic. From our vantage point, if you look at that specific exhibit, the top portion of the email signature is redacted. The entire bottom portion of that email is also redacted. There's, I think, 4 lines, if I'm not mistaken, in the exhibit you're looking at. Presumably, for most signature lines, that would end up including the contact information, the name of the person, and then underneath that, the agency information, and then underneath that, contact information. That's the typical flow that follows. Those portions are redacted from that request. However, the 2 items that give us strong indication that it's a request from ICE to the DMV to add this person into these Signal group chats is specifically because the correspondence that was requested was for the email addresses ending with ICE's traditional end, as well as communications between ICE and the DMV. We didn't ask for communications between the DMV and the Department of Health and Human Services, or between the DMV and the Department of Wildlife, right? These are not, maybe we will now, who knows, right? I don't know what other information is being shared, but we didn't request those. So the responsive nature of the request, as I've mentioned, is what gives us reason to believe that's the case. If not, again, we would ask for the full email to be made public, remove the redactions, and then we can find out. And if we're off base there, then the redaction will, removing the redaction will solve for that and answer a whole lot of questions. But if it's not, it raises a whole series of new questions, right? And so that's where we are with respect to understanding what that communication looked like. Any other questions? All right, thanks, folks. We appreciate you covering it. Feel free to put in your own records requests. If you get more lucky, then we'll do that. My apologies. Sammy and Chris are going to close us out. I think you had a final question with respect to the actual public records law provisions. Oh, I'm sorry. We'll take 2 more then. So go ahead. You go first.
Okay. So I'll address. Sorry. I'll address your specific question regarding what kind of claims and violations there are of the MPRA that we're alleging. So if you look at the writ of mandamus that we have filed, there's 3 separate claims. Each one corresponds with a certain violation of the Nevada Public Records Act. So the first violation is the fact that they did not respond to a public records request that we have made. So we put in the request, they just straight up did not respond to it. And this came after months and months of us trying to get information. Once they provided us these redacted documents, it was clear from those documents that there was additional emails, such as email group chains with the DMV and ICE potentially, as well as potential attachments within those emails that weren't provided. And so we made a request for that information. They continuously failed to respond to that. I think we made over 3 inquiries for them to actually respond, and they failed to respond. And so that's one of the claims there. The second claim is that, as was alluded to by Atar and Chris, is that they did not cite to legal authority that warrants them withholding the records. And this is especially important, I think, in the context that when we made these requests beginning in February, they came back and said, we have no records for you to provide. Didn't cite to any authority, didn't cite to whether or not they actually had the records. They just denied our request and closed that out. This happened probably over the course of 2-3 months without them providing anything. It took us filing the demand letter to their attorney saying, here's our communications. We have concerns about them not following the law. Then we then got these redacted ones. And then finally, the third claim is that when they did provide these documents, they cited to inapplicable parts regarding why they are redacted and why it wasn't being shared. Notably, one of the provisions that they cite to is NRS 481.063, which prohibits them sharing personal information for immigration enforcement purposes. So they invoke this to withhold records from the public, but yet from the emails indicate that they were freely potentially sharing it with ICE officials. So those are the three main ones, and happy to clarify if that wasn't as clear. You're welcome.
Mike. I think we had one final question.
Yeah, sorry, this might be a silly question, but do we know who's actually choosing the redactions? Is it the DMV? Is ICE getting a say in what's getting blacked out? Like, who is actually deciding what's getting blacked out in those documents?
That's a great question. We don't have the answer to who's making decisions with respect to redactions. The redaction process in this was pretty bizarre. There's certain correspondences that contain minimal redactions, but then there's redactions like the one in the message that we saw specifically with respect to a Signal group chat that seems so overly redacted it raises inherent questions, right? If you have other emails that contain signature blocks, it makes little sense then why this specific email that discusses Signal group chats would have an entirely redacted signature box. That's not the case with many of the other emails. But redactions are heavy throughout. I mean, you know, if we did a word count on it, which I wouldn't know how to do, if we did a word count on it, what's redacted versus what's not, it seems very heavily redacted, as Chris mentioned, versus what we've received prior, particularly since they had several months to get these requests together, and we continued to narrow searches to accommodate the DMV's request. Only after the Attorney General's office seemingly advised the DMV to turn over records did they respond to our request at all. They would have continued to summarily deny them, it's our opinion, if that didn't happen. And the public has a right to know all this information. Our agencies should be accountable to the public, and Sunshine's always going to be the best disinfectant. So, no further questions. We appreciate you all for your coverage. Not me. For the journal.